The opinions voiced on this program are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which investments may be appropriate for you, consult with your attorney, accountant, or financial advisor prior to investing. Securities and investment advisory services are offered through Genios Wealth Management Incorporated, member FINRA, SIPC.
What do you think it's costing you if you're not seeing the big picture regarding the important numbers in your business? Well, we're going to talk about that today on the Peter McClellan Show. We start now. Welcome to the Peter McClellan Show. This is your host, Peter McClellan. Whether you're joining us on AM 1570 or at www.thinkon.biz, we are, delighted. We really are. We want to say thank you for tuning in. And today we have an author of a great book, and it's got the #1 Wall Street Journal praise, #1 on Amazon, USA Today, Barnes and Noble. Even placed up there on the New York Times as well. Kevin Cope is the author of Seeing the Big Picture. So there it ties into that question I threw out at the start. Are you seeing the big picture? And what is it costing you and your company if you're not? So first of all, Kevin, welcome to the Peter McClellan Show.
Peter, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, my pleasure to have you. And this book is knocking it out of the park for a reason. Kevin, what's the need in the marketplace that you're addressing?
Well, over the last decade or so, we have found that organizations really need their employees to make good or better business decisions. And also you have leaders of organizations that also need to think more strategically or big picture about how they run their organization. So it's not only for business leaders, business owners, it's also for employees of organizations.
Okay, and normally we don't think of the employees as needing to understand. Maybe that's a misconception. I imagine it is. What's at stake if the employees aren't getting seeing the big picture, so to speak?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. And, as we're trying to climb out of this great recession, not only functionally smart, I think employees are great at IT, sales, or marketing, even accounting, but they don't always see that big picture, and therefore they don't make great business decisions oftentimes. They might make a decision that's good for their role or function, but not necessarily good for their company. So I think that's one reason why employees need it. Here's another, and I'll start by giving you a quote. People work hard for a paycheck, harder for a person, and hardest for a purpose. So the more employees see that big picture, they know how they connect to a company's performance, the more they'll be engaged in the business.
Wow, that was too profound to skim over that. Run that by us one more time, if you would.
Okay. Yeah, people work hard for a paycheck.
Okay.
Harder for a person, and hardest for a purpose. Meaning, if you really engage them around a direction or a meaning or a purpose, you really get not only their kind of hands and backs, you'll get their hearts and minds in it as well. You'll really get them bringing out all the stops, really being creative in their role, being innovative, and really engaged. Okay,
and so obviously the inverse of that is if employees don't have a view of the big picture, they're not going to get what the purpose is necessarily. They might work hard because they have a work ethic. They might show up and want to please their boss, but they may not actually see what the purpose is and get it, and then not have it in their heart and their mind.
Yeah, especially these, the millennials, the Gen Xers. They really have kind of a need to be engaged around meaning. They tend to job hop a little bit, and a lot of it is they're trying to find something that really, engages them, lights their hair on fire. And so the more they can see how they connect to driving the company's direction, the more they'll be engaged.
Okay. Well, you talk about the way to cut through some of the complexity of business and drill down to these key drivers. And why don't you share a little bit about what the drivers are? And then maybe we can come back and visit why they're so important to clear out the confusion and the complexity. What are those key drivers that you refer to?
Well, it may be helpful if you've got a paper and pencil to jot down kind of a diamond shape. And then let me fill in these 5 drivers. The top
All right, hang
point
on. If you're driving on the road, do not do this. Just keep it in your mind, okay?
Yeah, thank you.
Unless you're
So if
pulled
you're
off. If you're in traffic, okay, maybe try it, but not if you're moving. Don't do that.
Yeah, good safety tip.
Good safety tip.
So,
all right, Kevin, go ahead.
Yeah, so if you're picturing a diamond, the top point is cash.
Right.
The right point is profit. The bottom point is assets. The left point is growth. And then right in the middle is people. And so now here's why this is important. Each one of these are critically important by themselves, but it's also important to understand how they're very interdependent in nature. If you impact one, it will have an impact on the others. For example, if you're wanting to grow your business, it will have an impact on the other business drivers. It will take cash. It'll probably lower your profit margins in the short term because you're investing. Might impact your asset strength. And then certainly people, which is employees of the company and the customers they serve, could be impacted as well. So, Peter, those are the 5 drivers, just in a quick overview and kind of a mental map there, if you will.
Okay. Is there any symbolism in the fact that people are at the heart of it? I think there might be.
Absolutely. People drive the other 4, if you will.
Right.
It's the decisions that people make, and remember, people are the employees of the company, as well as the customers they serve. That interaction allows cash, profit, assets, and growth to take place and happen.
Okay. Now, again, I've perused the book, and one of the things that I find it very refreshing as a financial advisor. First of all, you're talking about cash. And I think part of what is ailing us as a culture, as a country, the planet, has been a 20 or 30-year period of time where we've talked so much about credit, and we've fueled the economy and on credit. And it's been at all levels, personal, at corporate level, certainly at all levels of government. And it's not just here in the United States. Look at Europe. The world's a mess in credit. So talk to us about cash, Kevin.
Well, certainly everybody's heard the term cash is king. I love what one CEO, Al Shagard of Seagate Technologies, said. Cash is more important than your mother. Now, he's
or maybe your mother-in-law. How's that?
Yeah. Now, he's no longer the CEO, so you can see how that played out for him.
Okay. He's gone.
But, yeah, no,
so what do you think he was getting at?
Yeah. So to your point, Peter, we really found out the cost of that excess credit starting in December 2007, where the Great Recession, officially began. And companies that were so reliant on that constant source of credit, stream of credit, when they weren't able to get it, certainly they found a great challenge. It's interesting to look at GM and Ford side by side. Both companies were struggling to sell, trucks and SUVs when the recession hit,
right,
in part because fuel prices were up and people couldn't afford them. But they went through that very differently. Ford didn't declare bankruptcy, and they're kind of making a bit of a comeback. GM declared bankruptcy. They took billions of dollars. Their CEO, Rick Wagner, was fired by President Obama. The difference was Ford had cash. They hired a guy from Alan Mulally from Boeing, became the CEO, and one of the first things he did, he recognized that they were too dependent on credit, and if things got soft, they would run into a challenge. He borrows $23 billion in cash, puts it aside, and that made all of the difference for Ford as they went through the Great Recession.
Now, interesting, though, that he borrowed $23 billion. So,
yeah. Now, part of that is he used some of their assets,
okay,
and so it wasn't, in many cases, just pure borrowing. It was literally leveraging some of the assets they had as collateral for those. And at the time, they thought, maybe he had leveraged the company too much. In hindsight, having that access to cash did make a lot of the difference. Now, there are many companies, I talked about the auto industry that's wrestled a bit for, a few years. There were a lot of companies that went into it with not near the borrowing as others. J.P. Morgan, for example, had a much stronger balance sheet, had a lot less borrowing on their balance sheet, and therefore J.P. Morgan gets through it much differently than, say, Citibank or AIG, some of the others out there.
All right, Kevin, you're obviously talking today to a lot of CEOs, but you're also speaking to a lot of mom pops, small businesses. Talk to us about the importance of cash in that realm.
Well, certainly, The number, a number one reason a small business or a startup is going to fail, if they do, is their lack of cash.
Yeah.
Last statistics I've seen, about 35% of startups will make it 4 or 5 years. 2/3 will not, and the number one reason that's cited is cash. And so when I'm talking about cash, I usually refer to it in two ways. One is the cash you have on hand, which is critical for a startup. And then it's the cash you're able to generate from your core business, which once you get out of your startup phase, you need to figure out how to have that ongoing cash generated from your operating activities.
Do you have any guides, rules of thumb in terms of how much cash, I don't know, as a percentage of monthly operating expense that might be wise to have set aside?
It's probably going to be different for every industry, and part of it depends on your cash conversion cycle. If you're like maybe a retail store, they tend to turn their cash conversion cycle really fast. I mean, they might, let's say you've got a little mom and pop corner store. You buy a gallon of milk, you'll probably get your cash back on that within a couple of days. Okay. Versus if you're maybe a startup manufacturer technology company where you invest in R&D, or maybe you invest in some raw materials that may take weeks or months, possibly even years to get that cash back. So companies who have shorter cash conversion cycles usually don't have as much cash stockpiled. Companies who have very long cash conversion cycles may need to have 3, 4, 5, 6 months, maybe a year's cash on hand.
Okay, good guide. I like that a lot. That's excellent. And then you tie that back to growth. Obviously, when you expend the cash, you might be diminishing your profit a little bit. You might be even spending some of your assets, I suppose. Talk to us about growth, if you would.
Growth, now if you're a public company, growth is just necessary. Shareholders demand it. But, many of your listeners, Peter, may be smaller organizations that they're not public, don't have shareholders. I would still suggest that growth can be important for at least 3 reasons. And it can be more of a choice. Maybe you've got a great lifestyle business, and maybe you're not so much pushed for growth, but here's 3 things to consider. One is that growth really keeps you innovative. If you're not growing, you're dying in many cases, especially if you're in a competitive environment.
Absolutely.
So that's one thing to keep in mind. A second is growth. If you're growing your business, you'll build value in your business. So maybe if you're looking to sell out someday or have some kind of equity event, then growth will help build the value of your business. And then maybe one of the most important is this third one. Companies that are growing tend to keep good employees, and they also tend to attract really good employees because people want to work in an organization that's thriving, that they can see a career path in, that they can have their pay increase, and that all happens more likely in a growing organization.
Absolutely, rather than a stagnant one. Kevin, we're bumping up against the clock. The book is Seeing the Big Picture. Author is Kevin Cope. Obviously, Kevin, we can get this book anyplace. Go to Amazon.com, right? Barnes & Noble?
Absolutely, and our website, seeingthebigpicture.com, will also create a link for you there as well.
Great, and this book is not, knocking it out of the park for no reason. It's meeting a need. We need to understand the numbers. Numbers talk to us. When we come back, we'll continue this conversation with Kevin. You know who's next. It's Angus. Stay tuned. And now it's time for another nagging Scottish moment. Take it away, Peter, you nag. Hey, thanks, laddie. Here's the nagging Scottish moment for you. Seeing the big picture. Today we're privileged to be speaking with Kevin Cope of Acumen Learning. He is the author of Seeing the Big Picture. This is a book that's, getting wild reviews, great success, #1 in the Wall Street Journal, Amazon, USA Today, Barnes & Noble. So obviously Kevin's filling a need here, meeting a need in the marketplace. Kevin points out in the book that too many people fail to understand the basics of what makes their company tick and how this connects to the overall success or failure of their firm. He claims that achieving business acumen is absolutely critical. But Peter, financial statements, they're for accountants to understand. I hate those bloody things. Do I really have to understand that? I'm an employee of a company. Angus, Kevin would say, yeah. Just because you're the employee doesn't mean you shouldn't. You don't have to be the corporate executive or even the entrepreneur. You should as an employee, because it's critical, absolutely critical. Well, Peter, why is that? Because when you better understand the essentials of cash, profit, assets, growth, and people, you will inevitably make better decisions. And you'll build your career, you'll build the company, you'll do great things for your own career. It's a good thing. But Peter, I've got no time to go back and get my MBA program. I'm too bloody busy at this stage of my life. Angus, that's the beauty of Kevin's book, Seeing the Big Picture. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't get an MBA sometime. Maybe that's a good thing, and I'm sure it would be for some. But, go back and do that when you have the time. But in the meantime, pick up a copy of this book, Seeing the Big Picture. An excellent primer for you to be thinking better about, just seeing things better, understanding statements better. It's a useful guide to help you understand the most important and relevant data as it pertains to your business. Well, I suppose reading a wee book is better for me at this point than having to go back and get an official designation. Peter, do you really think it'll help me better understand financial statements like that, balance sheets and profit and loss statements, all that stuff? Yeah, I do, Angus. And, I don't care to be the one gathering that data, and that's why I have a bookkeeper and an accountant, but having that information compiled so I understand it, it's a wonderful thing. Well, how's that, Peter? Because when you begin to really understand your numbers for your business, your company, even if it's not your company, you're an employee, the numbers will speak to you. They will give you insight that you simply don't have if you're not looking at those numbers. So you make much, much better decisions that are informed decisions when you have the numbers in front of you and you understand them. You understand their importance. Oh, Peter, that's fine, but how does this all relate back to an individual situation? Well, I think the book, Seeing the Big Picture, is a wonderful guide for individuals as well as people that are in companies. Getting down to the basics, for example, when an individual creates a budget and tracks their spending, they begin to get insight into the areas where they might be tempted to overspend, or they are overspending, and they can modify that behavior. Now you sound like Maggie. She is always reminding me, Peter, or Angus rather, she said, you're spending too much at the grocery store. You're buying too many clothes for the kids. Well, Angus, you hit on a major area that a lot of people get tripped up on, impulse buying. And it may not be groceries or clothing, it might be some other thing. But if it's out of control, it's your Achilles heel. And it's weakness, and you've got to address your weakness. It's essential if you're going to not overspend and, get a handle on what's important. Oh, Peter, you're a killjoy. No, Angus, the killjoy that I've observed is the overwhelming sadness when I meet people who have neglected those numbers and understanding those numbers their entire life. They've never seen the big picture, and as a result, they never prioritize where the money went. So over the course of their life, they've overspent. They've not done wise things. So many people would say, oh, if I could have just saved 10 or 15% of my income my whole life. To which I say, you could have if you weren't overspending. And oh yeah, you could have if you'd gotten out of debt. You could have if you'd have stopped using your credit when it was killing you and winding up with big monthly payments. Oh, Peter, that's a good reason, I suppose, to read that thing. And yeah, okay, I'll do that. But let's get it straight, Peter. You are a professional nag. You nag constantly. Well, Angus, if my nagging is in some way going to give people the incentive to deal with truth, because truth sets you free. When you realize what you're doing to yourself, and you can move to a better place, how much better is that? And just a quick point, if you want some help, some counsel on an individual level, give us a call at the 401k Latte Company at 952-882-0400. When we come back, Kevin Cope, author of Seeing the Big Picture, is going to be with us after the news. Don't go away. You're going to get some insight. Welcome back to the Peter McClellan Show, and if you're just joining us, we are privileged today to be speaking with Kevin Cope. He is the author of Seeing the Big Picture, and his company is Business Acumen, and I like the name, and I like what it does. But this book is gaining some traction. #1 bestseller at the Wall Street Journal, Amazon, USA Today, Barnes & Noble. It's placing pretty high in the New York Times list as well. So obviously this is resonating with a lot of people. Kevin, you talk about 5 key drivers of business. And what would you say, in your mind's eye, is the most important one? And maybe, first of all, for those just joining us, bring us back to what those 5 are, if you will, and what is number 1?
Yeah, so those 5 drivers, again, are cash, profit, assets, growth, and people. Now, it may be helpful to know that the first 3 drivers of cash, profit, and assets simply relate to the 3 financial statements that companies put together. You've got the statement of cash flows, which is about cash. You've got the profit and loss statement, which, of course, is about profit. And then you have the balance sheet, which lists your assets, your liabilities, and then your net assets or your equity. Growth is there because, public companies, their shareholders demand growth. And as we talked earlier, even small companies thrive on growth. And then, of course, right in the middle is people. That's the employees of the company who serve your customers well. Now, back to your question of, so which is the most important?
Right.
Part of it depends on where you are in your life cycle. As we talked about earlier, if you're a brand new startup, cash is going to be critical to your organization.
Yeah.
Maybe if you're more of a mature company, and thriving pretty well, the focus tends to be for larger organizations, mature companies, growth and profit. Maybe you're struggling, then it kind of comes back to cash, and then also that asset strength. Maybe if you've had a miss with your customers, then it becomes all about people. We certainly have seen where Toyota had to refocus back on people after a few of their recalls, and Johnson & Johnson is needing to do the same thing now, given some of the recalls they've had.
Oh, you talked about in the first segment how the difference between Ford and Chevy was cash. And obviously, Toyota as well now. I'm impressed. They seem to be going forward with their, I'm jokingly calling them golf carts, these electric cars. But I understand Chevy is pulling the Volt off of production. So, again, maybe there's something to be said for really understanding your numbers as to whether or not it's a good idea to go in a certain direction. Maybe the Volt just wasn't ready. It wasn't the right time. I don't know. I'm intrigued by this, but I still see them advertising the Toyota. I don't see them advertising the Chevy Volt.
Yeah, Toyota had a nice turnaround, a couple of years ago. They went from, I believe they even had a loss, to really focusing on the customer, turning around into some nice profits for the organization. So they've got a little more staying power. Even with a product, they might try to get out to the market and have to seed that product's existence, meaning support that product for a time.
Right.
And certainly, with oil prices going up again, they'll be well positioned.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, I'm confident it will get traction at some point if they've done it right. I don't know what's missing with the Chevy Volt. I don't really claim to understand all that. I haven't looked at it that closely. But you're bringing up some great points about the importance. Oh, first of all, the people. What was it that Toyota did relative to people?
Well, as you'll recall that there were kind of some of the issues, and they had the recalls, maybe the accelerator getting stuck, floor mats, things like that. So they had kind of a 2-pronged focus. One, they realized that they had a bit of a perception problem of their product being still quality with customers. And so they had to kind of rebrand, remake, reconnect with the customers there. On the profit side, they recognized they had to make sure they were focused on the right things in the business, those products, those cars, vehicles that were doing well, and then maybe cut out those programs that weren't core to the business. And so they really had a kind of a focus on the customer, or that people driver in the middle, as well as the profit side as well.
Oh, that's great. Good stuff. And any company would be wise to do that. Again, tying it back to smaller companies, I suppose it's still going to be a focus on people, especially if you're talking about your clients, your customers, those that are buying your goods, your service. There has to be attention to that, or you're not going to have a business.
Absolutely. And there were a couple of folks, Sam Walton used to kind of comment on this, the founder and longtime CEO of Walmart. And I think Stephen R. Covey has made a similar comment as well, and that is that you need to treat your employees like you want them to treat your best customers. So a lot of customer service starts with the very culture you create in your business. I think right now, they're a little bit of a larger organization. Apologize for this, another big company example, but they're kind of in that mid-size as Zappos. I was listening to Tony Hsieh a few months back. Zappos has a really interesting approach to hiring people. First of all, they really have two sets of interviews. One is around, do you have the skills to do the job?
Okay.
And the other is, do you fit into our culture? Do you really have this customer service mentality? And what's really interesting is everybody goes through the same 5-week or a similar 5-week orientation at Zappos. And if you're not familiar with Zappos, my wife's introduced me to them. They started with shoes, and they do free shipping back and forth, known for phenomenal customer service. But here's what's interesting. After an employee's been there 5 weeks, they actually offer that employee, and remember, this has been an expensive recruiting, hiring, orientation process. They'll actually offer their employees at that point $3,000 to leave the company.
Really?
Really? Yeah, seriously. In other words, they want to make sure an employee's committed.
Right.
And if they actually give up a $3,000 bonus opportunity to leave, Tony, the CEO, knows that they're committed at that point in time.
Wow.
And if you have committed employees, committed to the culture, they're going to give great customer service.
Wow. That's unique. Very unique. I like that. Because then you have the commitment. You have the people that are going to be there taking care of the people, the customers. That's brilliant. That really is brilliant.
It's really kind of an acid test, if you will. You know, if you have an employee that's only been there 5 weeks that chooses to stay to the point they're willing to pass up, a $3,000 check. And remember, a lot of these folks are call center people. $3,000 would mean a lot, but boy, that would really then speak volumes to how committed they are to that organization.
It's huge. That's a great story. A great story. So tell us some more about the numbers. What does the employee? Let's take the customer service employee. Let's say it's somebody at Zappos or Walmart, Sam's Club, whatever. What difference does it make for the employee to understand some of the important numbers of the business?
Yeah, and I don't know that they need to understand every detail about the financial statements. They don't need to be accountants.
Right.
But here's what they need to have a sense of. They need to be able to connect what they do day in and day out to the performance of the company. When people have a sense of, boy, if I can make a better decision on this, I think I'm going to save us money. If I save us money, our profits will increase. When they can see that direct connectedness to the performance of the company, then they're able to make better decisions. Companies don't improve their bottom line profits by simply an executive saying, hey, we need to improve profits. It happens because you have the employees of the company making better decisions around that, understanding how they connect to the strategy. Therefore, those better decisions, they'll be more engaged in making better decisions. And I think that makes all the difference in a high-performing organization. If you want to know how well a company will do a year from now, look at employee engagement scores today. If employees are engaged today, that's your best leading indicator that your company will be performing well a year from now.
How can a smaller company monitor or measure the level of engagement of their employees?
Yeah, so let's say you're, a small company, say you've got 10, 20 employees. I think a lot of a sense of employee engagement is simply walking around and getting a sense of how people are engaged in the actual work or role that they're performing. I think another is find times to get away one-on-one, whether it's to take an employee to lunch. Maybe you have a few quiet minutes in your office to really get a sense and ask them, so how are you doing? And an important question might be, what are you excited about in our business? And if you kind of sense that they're going on about, well, I'm excited about this or that with not a lot of passion or energy in that conversation, maybe you've got an employee that's going through the motion. But if you've got an employee that, as they're describing what they're excited about, you see energy, passion. You see their voice exuding kind of interest in the conversation in the company. That would be a sense of, their engagement as well. You can also see, when do they show up to work? When do they leave? Does it look like they're watching the clock and at 5 they're, right out the door? Or do people tend to be around after that? That might be another measure of engagement in the organization.
Okay. And I guess the deciding thing too that I would hope would be an honest conversation. I think perhaps some organizations by the nature of how they're managing, they have something to do with how engaged employees are. And then obviously you also have the employee. Perhaps the employee is not going to ever be engaged. Maybe they need to find a different place to work. That's certainly a possibility. But again, maybe it's not the employee's problem. Maybe it's a problem with the organization. Like you said, it's you're not just going to have profits or have a consciousness of cost and of improving the bottom line just because the CEO says so or because the manager says so. There has to be that involvement at all levels. So I would wonder how we go about that. What was that, Kevin?
Yeah. Sorry, I interrupted you, but I read an interesting article in USA Today 5-6 months ago, and the essence of the article was that about at that time, 38% of individuals who currently have a job think they'll be in a new job in the next year. Meaning they're just, once the economy improves, things get better, they've got their resume ready to go.
Right.
And it's interesting. They said, as part of that employers generally didn't know it was that bad. There seemed to be a disconnect between employers thinking, hey, people are just happy to have a job right now, and employees are saying, boy, yeah, I'm happy to have a job right now, but as soon as things get better, I'm, off somewhere else.
Right.
And here's kind of the end point of the article. It said, look, one of the best ways to keep an employee more engaged is to have a simple career pathing conversation with that employee. Get a sense of where do they want to go, what do they want to be or do in their role in the organization. Doesn't mean you have to give them a promotion, but by showing genuine interest in their career and their career path, that will make a lot of difference in how engaged they'll be in the business.
That makes sense. It at least shows you have a level of concern for them. And I think that's invaluable. And I'm of the opinion that leadership is such a big item. And I think when we lack leadership, we're not going to have people engaged. We're going to have people disconnected. And I think more of the fault, there certainly can be fault on the part of the organization. It's not necessarily the employee's fault that they want to leave. We've got to take a deeper look at how is the company being run, and are we having those conversations that engage the employees? So great food for thought. And I guess the bottom line here too, Kevin, getting back to the book, is seeing the big picture. Again, I've only perused it, but I imagine this is so much more than just numbers. You're talking about things that go right to the heart of the spirit of the organization, the heart and soul of the organization. That's huge. And obviously there's much more to this than just numbers.
Absolutely. And I think great leaders, and you mentioned the importance of leadership. The Gallup organization surveyed tens of thousands of individuals and found that those who left an organization, the number one reason was the relationship they had with their manager. And so it speaks volumes to the importance of leadership.
Yeah.
And I think one of the attributes of a great leader is the ability to articulate the big picture for their organization.
Yeah.
To be able to explain cash, profit, assets, and growth to their people. To be able to communicate it in a way that every employee gets a sense of why those drivers are important and what they can do or contribute to help the company perform more effectively in those areas.
Wonderful. Well, you're listening to the Peter McClellan Show on AM 1570, Twin Cities Business Radio. And today we're talking about the business of seeing the big picture. This is a great book. I'd encourage anyone listening today to pick it up, whether you're a CEO, an entrepreneur, an employee that wants to have a better sense of purpose in what you're doing. Great stuff. You can go to www.amazon and get it any number of places. Kevin Cope's the author. When we come back, we'll continue our conversation with Kevin. Don't go away.
On the go, the Peter McClellan Show has an app for iPhone and Android. Check it out at thinkon.biz.
Welcome back to the Peter McClellan Show, and if you're just joining us, you've got to go back and hear the show. And I know I say that every day, but if you want to really get a value of seeing the big picture and what that means to your organization, whether you're an employee, a CEO, whether you're the owner, whatever, this is a great book. The book is Seeing the Big Picture by Kevin Cope. And boy, I've really enjoyed this. I've only perused the book. I'm going to read this. This goes on my list to read because this is great stuff. Kevin, you've shared a number of stories today of organizations that have employed these principles, the key drivers that you see as so vital. Maybe another story for us. Where do you want to go from here?
Well, it'd be useful to give another example of a company who seems to emulate a lot of these business drivers. And it's from an industry that doesn't always get a lot of, positive comments about it. Doesn't have a great reputation, and that's the airline industry.
Oh, I'd say that. Yeah.
And many airlines have struggled. American Airlines declared bankruptcy here not too long ago. But there's one company that kind of stands out and has for a number of years, and that's Southwest Airlines. They've been in business now, I think, 45, 46 years, something like that. And here's what's interesting. They have never had a loss in their 46-year history. 46-year history.
That's remarkable.
Which for an airline is amazing.
Yeah, it is.
Now, they've had a couple of years that were pretty tough. After 9/11 was tough. In this great recession, kind of tough. But they've still managed to turn a profit. Now, here's what's interesting when you tie it to the other business drivers. Because they've been profitable every year, they have never had a layoff in their 40-plus year history, which for an airline, again, is amazing. And so you can see how a company who has managed to do well around profit, they also continue to grow, acquired, AirTran. And right in the center of that, you can see how running the cash, profit, assets, and growth well allows them to also take care of their employees, their people. Their culture is unique. And in addition to that, if you treat your people like you want them to treat their best customers, they've never had a layoff, their employees are more committed, and their level of customer service is also somewhat unprecedented in the airline industry. And so you can see how Southwest really ties these together.
That's a beautiful thing, and that's so needed today because, like you say, you don't want to be part of an organization where as things pick up, 37% leave because, they haven't felt engaged, they haven't been involved because the lack of leadership, lack of understanding these drivers, the cash, the profit, the assets, the growth, the people. And obviously the people are at the core of that diamond. Wow, time has flown, Kevin. I've so enjoyed this opportunity to speak with you. The book is Seeing the Big Picture. Kevin Cope, founder of Acumen Learning. Kevin, how can people get a hold of this book?
Well, our website is seeingthebigpicture.com. Certainly you can find it there, and as you mentioned earlier, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, etc.
Wonderful. I'd encourage anyone that wants to grow, wants to have engaged people serving the people that you value most, those who buy your goods and services. Great book, great concept. And just a reminder for our listeners, tomorrow, it's another Sunshine Friday with Jeff Hyback of Strategic Equity Management. It also marks our 3rd year anniversary and the day we part ways with AM 1570. And we love them. We're thankful for Salem Communication, but we also are focused on trends. And we're seeing things like laptops and smartphones and podcasting. It's good stuff. So I want to encourage you, stay with the Peter McClellan Show. We're not going to go away. What do you say, Angus? Well, Peter, I'd say, think on.
You've been listening to The Peter McClellan Show. Peter McClellan, CHFC, is the president of the 401k Latte Company. To reach Peter, call 952-882-0400 or on the web at 401klatte.com. This program is sponsored by the 401k Latte Company. Securities and investment advisory services are offered through Jenny Else Wealth Management Incorporated, member FINRA SIPC, and a registered investment advisor. For more information, go to 401klatte.com or call 952-882-0400. If you missed the show, catch up at thinkon.biz.